begin by giving a few brief announcements. The first being I would like to wish George Humphrey a happy birthday today. I'm not sure the exact age, but he has been a mainstay down here at Access Television for a long time and an activist in the community and a good friend of the show here and myself. So I wanted to definitely say happy birthday to George Humphrey. And next I want to mention the previous shows that we have that are on the Google video. And we have quite a bit up there now these days. And I want to thank Ikeper for being so diligent and patient and putting those up there. And so there are probably about maybe 20 shows total, Esoteric Science Roundtable previous shows. And also, obviously, shows that we have linked up to Freeman's television shows that he has up there, the Freeman Perspective, and also some Therefore I Am with Jeff Contreras, by virtue of the different guest hosting that we've done and what have you. We found that they've linked themselves up that way nicely, and so you can go from one to the next and get a lot of information right there from all three of us. And again, I'm really grateful that that's the case. Also want to remind folks that tonight, 10 p.m., you have your choice. Therefore I Am or the Freeman Perspective, Jeff Contreras, Therefore I Am, Channel 10, and the Freeman Perspective on Channel 16. So perhaps set the recording device and view one, because you certainly won't want to miss either show. I know they're both going to be good today. So let's see. Also want to thank people that showed up to my Theosophical Study Group meeting. Small turnout, but nonetheless, that's pretty much the nature of the group, and I do thank the folks that came out. Again, that'll be the second Wednesday next month, and I'll remind folks closer to that time. Also, upcoming the third Wednesday of this month will be the 17th, and that is the Metaphysical Philosophical Study Group, or meeting rather, casual, carefree meeting more appropriately, that we here at Esoteric Science Roundtable and Jeff Contreras, Therefore I Am, host every third Wednesday of the month at Spider House. Again, starting 8 p.m. until when people decide to leave. Very relaxed and carefree atmosphere, casual atmosphere. So please do take the opportunity to come down if you are of the mind to do so. Okay, so I'm also very grateful to be here this evening on Access, just to be able to speak about these various esoteric topics. Today's topic that I want to get into, I've entitled Wish Life. And the wish life is a very, very big part of our human living, our everyday experience, and our sleeping experience. It takes a tremendous part of the sleeping aspect as well. When we dream at night, we are working out this wish life in that condition, and we're actually in the more truer aspect of ourselves when we're in the dream world as well. And so we can get a lot of work done along those lines. We as humanity do spend a lot of time wanting, wishing, dreaming, daydreaming, aspiring, desiring, and trying to fulfill these wants, whims, and wishes that we have in our everyday life. They may take, and they do take in most cases, more of a material slant. People are trying to acquire perhaps relationships. They want to acquire a particular career. They want to acquire material items, a nice car, for instance. Any number of things that people are wanting, and they seek to attract in their daily lives at some level. This is all part of this wish life, so-called. Excuse me. And so we find ourselves centering, as I said earlier, a lot of our energy upon these things that we're seeking to desire, that we desire and we seek to obtain, rather. And so these things are very much things. They have substance, and they have an energy behind them that creates them, essentially. And depending on the intensity of desire and the sustained, level of that desire or that wanting, these are going to factor very much the ultimate outcome of what it is that we're hoping to gain or obtain. And so, again, people are going to be more centered in the wish life, some more so than others, and obviously certain people are going to obviously aspire or want different things. The way in which the desire nature works out, it works out in this energetic fashion through the centers in the body. And most would know that, watch this show, that there are 7 main centers, 7 energy centers that follow essentially the line of the spine from the base of the spine to the top of the head, which is known as the crown chakra. So from the root to the crown, there's 7 specific energy points in that line. And we can consider ourselves dual if we consider ourselves from the waist down and the waist up, and that as being two segments of our being, of our physical makeup. That this twofold aspect also can be considered a dividing line for the way in which these energies play out through humanity. The way in which the dividing line works out essentially is along the lines of the solar plexus center, and that particular great energy center, as it works out, is working through. It allows us to work through these dreams and these desires and things of that nature. And it's the solar plexus center is very much tied into instinct, which we have in common with the animals. And so the solar plexus center in humanity is in essence, in many respects, the most active center in our humanity, and it's essentially the seat of consciousness for the animal kingdom, because that's essentially what drives them and motivates them, is their instinctual nature at any given time in their lifetime. We, on the other hand, have our self-conscious nature, which allows us to transmute the instinctual nature into the intuitive nature. Excuse me, and that ties into this dividing line. This ties into moving from the animal urge area in the solar plexus to a transmutation which is above the diaphragm and in the upper portion of our physical nature into the heart center. And that playing out between that duality is a constant, there's a constant swinging back and forth in that respect. And so we essentially have this solar plexus center. It has many functions, but in essence, it helps us to create a record or a mirror image of, again, these things that we're seeking and desiring in life. And this is also one of the reasons why we tend to find so many ailments due to the incorrect or improper stimulation of the solar plexus center. And so, by virtue of this, the area, the location, where the solar plexus center is, and the energy working out, excuse me, makes for a way in which, excuse me, one second. Allows for a way in which, again, these energies work out in this area, and so by virtue of it being in this location in the body, there are going to be certain areas that it's going to affect more so. And the intestines, the intestines are the main region or area that are affected, and certainly the stomach is affected as well. And so when we think about what we hope to attain and desire, sometimes we can get sick. We can get sick at our stomachs, if you will, or sick with longing. And this certainly does tie into this nature of ours. And so people that do have constant recurring, intestinal trouble, stomach ailments, and those that have, maybe really bad the acid reflux and things of that nature, will have this center very much in flux or in turmoil. And again, this is because it's tied in back to our desires and our desire nature, and unfulfilled desires or improperly processed desires will lead to, again, like a volcano erupting. And we can think of our stomach being upset with stress or anxiety in the same fashion. And a whole host of medicines have cropped up and been marketed towards these exact symptoms that are tied in to what is, usually a welling up of anxiety, and again, ultimately tying it back to this, in many respects, ultimately tied back to unfulfilled desires and wants and wishes that things that we can't have, that we aren't able to obtain, and so we make ourselves sick over it in many respects. Much of the pancreatic cancer and the pancreatic situations are tied in to the solar plexus center troubles as well, in addition to liver problems. Again, many types of cancer, and this basically plays out in a congestion in many respects. And so this flux and this turmoil of energy is not allowed to process itself above the diaphragm in the normal, healthy fashion in which it should, and so all this trouble amounts as a result of that. the natural way in which the pendulum swing should work is, again, from the desire nature, the aspiring nature, into the heart. Now, not everyone thinks in that way. Not everyone, and another thing as well, generally, again, considering the instinctual animal nature is very much tied into materialistic or our personality desires. And so group thinking or synthetic thinking or thinking of others and thinking about things based on love and inclusiveness is not very common to those people that are so, again, working through this solar plexus energy, that they are so preoccupied with their own area of playing out in the world that they don't see past their own nose in many cases, and so they're not even aware of current events and things that are happening in other parts of the globe that ultimately do affect us, because certainly we are one humanity. And that being the case with our one humanity, this is tied to other humans as well, and we can consider the solar plexus energy again from the animal standpoint in kind of a herd mentality sentiment as well. When one segment of the herd is sensing trouble, then there's sort of a ripple effect, and some surmise it's a psychic effect or what have you, but there is an energetic that plays out through a herd or through a group of animals that know if there's trouble coming in many cases. And so that same symptomatic plays out through humanity. And so we also can have that rumbling, if you will, that gut instinctual feeling that something's about to happen. And so we can sense that, and so we are concerned. And also it ties in, if we see something happening to our fellow man, or we see something, an impending something or another, somebody's about to get hit by a car or something like that, you certainly do feel that. You feel that empathy instantly, and you feel probably your gut, just wrenching as a result of having to witness something like that, and also the subsequent thoughts that tie into that and all that. But my point being is that we, through the solar plexus center, through our instinctual nature, are tied in. Now, at the higher turn of the spiral, or the more inclusive nature, the heart is the center or the area in which that energy plays out. But again, even at the base level, that the herd mentality still plays out through our humanity, and we can sense what's happening to a large degree, and we can, again, certainly empathize with situations with our fellow men. Now, as this pendulum swing takes place, and so we can imagine from the lower nature to the higher nature, our aspirations tend to change over time, and experience certainly factors in as well as we accumulate a greater understanding about this life and how things work. Hopefully people will make a conscious choice to be less selfish, and hopefully that will continue to factor in, and so the pendulum will start to swing more so into the nature of the heart and the nature of inclusiveness. And so as the pendulum swing continues more so and becomes more of a constant habit, where the energy becomes more readily fixed in the heart arena as opposed to the solar plexus at that point becomes more of just a channel for energy, or a conduit for the energy to make its way, and becomes more of a clearinghouse for energies. Kind of like in the same way, I guess, that the kidneys and the liver are cleansers for the body in a physical sense. Those are cleansers for energy, and that's a pretty decent analogy, actually, that the cleansing that takes place in that respect is refined and accentuated through the heart nature. And so as one becomes more fixated on inclusiveness and aspires more towards group thinking and synthetic thinking, and again, things based on love instead of exclusiveness and just me thinking, then the nature of that is going to be more accentuated. As I said, the heart will become more dominant, and this will also enact other energies to unfold and to work out in a corresponding fashion. And so much of esoteric science is based on triangles of energy working out. And so certainly the main triangle that most might consider esoterically would be the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I will get into how the energetic ties into that. But there are many lesser triangles that intersect and comprise these greater energy triangles. One of them being a triangle that's made up of 3 points consisting of the solar plexus energy, the heart center, and the third eye, so-called, or the Ajna center, the intuitional center. Keeping in mind, as I said earlier, that the center below the diaphragm, the solar plexus, is also the clearinghouse and is a place for the instinctual animal urges that they work through that energy center. The intuitional nature, once the heart has been activated, can become also more functioning. And so the personality tends to center away, and the focus from inside oneself starts to turn out, and the light is shown outwards. And so our intuitional nature certainly very much ties us into the nature of the soul, and again, more inclusive thinking. And so when we intuit things, we're able to ascertain and perceive a lot of potential things playing out. And this, again, is tied with this heart nature. And so these 3 points make a triangle of energy. And so as this energy works through, from the solar plexus center as the clearinghouse, through the heart as the radiant amplification point, and then ultimately to the Ajna center as a broadcasting center, ultimately. We can think of it as a mini broadcasting tower, in essence, if you want to do it in that sense, and that's a good analogy as well. And ultimately, the broadcasting through the Ajna center allows us to have that intuitional tie-in with our fellow humanity, and this, again, ties us into having commonality of ideas, and commonality of interest, and commonality of again, the greater, grander energies playing out, not just the herd instinct energies that we might have in common through the solar plexus. The intuitional or Ajna center awakening, or in conjunction in this triangle, is going, again, to allow us to understand ideas and understand unfolding ideas that are precipitating into our human consciousness. And so we have some, again, insight into what will be by virtue of minds uniting in this fashion. Now, this is something as well that is a reasonably new component for our humanity. The solar plexus center has been the main focus of humanity for thousands and thousands of years. But as far as the factor of mind that ties into the way in which the energy plays out, excuse me, that's changed. Our energy of mind is much more focused, potent, and acute than ever in the history of humanity. And so our mind fuels our desire nature. And so if there's already turmoil and flux in the solar plexus center, and we're already prone to stomach problems, intestinal things, and just, again, physical ailments and physical discomfort due to a wrong processing of energy, this very much ties in. And as far as how, I lost my train of thought a bit there, as far as how this, again, the pendulum swing of the energy, and at the point of soul contact, again, this becomes a more permanent fixture. The let's see, let me just start from another point here. There are other, again, considering that point of energy in mind, there are other lesser triangles of energy, or other energies that work out and swing in a pendulum fashion as well. And one of those is the center that is tied to the reproductive organs, and that's known as the sacral center. And so the sacral center is also aligned or tied to the throat center, and that represents or symbolizes creativity. Certainly we could think of the voice and creating sound and a means of expression and a means of communication through the throat. And again, keeping in mind that's the higher correspondence above the diaphragm to the lower, which is, again, the regenerative organs. So we can stay focused and keep the energy in the regenerative portion of humanity, or our nature rather, our human nature. And that's when we get tied into potential for too much focus on the sex life, too much emphasis on sex energy. And again, in our day and age, the mind nature, that's getting back to the mind nature. The mind nature has become so potent that these wishes are very potent. And that's getting back to the original thought that I lost earlier. Our mind is so potent that our wishes and our wants, again, are so acute. And so if we do overly stimulate and over-focus our wish life based on wishing for sexual gratification, for instance, that is going to keep the regenerative organ energy constipated or constricted. And this is where certainly prostate cancer and things like that become more prevalent. And in women, ovarian cancer and the uterine cancer and things like that come into play could easily be tied into not having the proper flow of energy through that area by virtue of not having, it's not necessarily unpure or clean thoughts, that's a bit of a misnomer, but having just a proper, healthy relationship with yourself and your sex organs, basically. And that's something that Wilhelm Reich, one of the students of Freud, spent much time analyzing, the energy related to, again, the orgasm, and energy relating to the nature of duality that's symbolized and represented through the union of a man and a woman. And so again, that energy can be not healthfully considered and can cause a backup or again a constriction in which there's trouble that would crop up as a result of that. Also, we did mention, well, again, getting back to some aspects about the centers, another little quick insert, the adrenal glands that sit above the kidneys. Certainly we can have that anxiety and that nervousness, and that can certainly tie into the stomach area and the lower intestines and play out in that manner. But we can also use some of this energy in a more positive respect, in that the adrenaline rush that we can get can spur us on to, or motivate us into some activity. Like, for instance, just right before a live show starts, or before producing a live show, there's certainly, in my estimation, from my experience anyway, rather, a little bit of an anxiety rush, or a little bit of a nervous energy working out, because it's a live situation, and so obviously we want things to work out properly and all that, and so that definitely factors in. But it's kind of like fuel for the fire, I think, in a more positive sense. And so there's always that fine balance that we can use that to our benefit, or we can use it as allow it to be a hindrance and overwhelm us. And so again, our mind nature has become so potent, and our thoughts and our wishes are so acute, that if under certain conditions, if we're not able to manifest these things, we certainly are moving a great amount of energy. And we as humanity collectively are having our energies oftentimes diverted away from more, again, heart-centered or inclusive or group or synthetic thinking, towards the more individual ways of thinking. And certainly the marketing, if we consider marketing of cars and marketing of any number of things that we see, people tend to feel, due to marketing and due to their own reaction to it, that they need to acquire these things. And so much time and energy is spent researching what is available, what's the next gadget with all the bells and whistles, and then attaining it, acquiring it. And so we're shown what the establishment in many cases wants us to spend our energy on, and what they want us to objectify is material gain, possessions, things. And ultimately, people, in my experience, that gain things and pretty much get what they want in a material sense, still remain unfulfilled. There's still a huge void, and that ties in as well too. You can sense that void. You can sense that not being fulfilled. It's like still being hungry for food after you've just eaten a full meal, and it's due to that void where the energy hasn't made that pendulum swing and become more consistent. So at the point of soul contact, these wants, whims, and ambitions can become wants, whims, and ambitions towards humanity and towards helping the race. And so there are a number of people on the planet, and increasingly so, more so, that expend their time and trouble, excuse me, they expend much energy in a dream or wishful state, being hopeful or optimistic about the future of humanity. Certainly there are just as many that spend their wish life or their daydreaming time being pessimistic about the outlook of things, and seeing all the negativity that's apparent, and very much so if we watch the news for any length of time, or just again being aware of current events, we can just as easily be quite pessimistic. So again, it's where we want to lay that energy, lay that focus. We, by virtue of where we lay our attention and energy, are what we are. The makeup of our physical body is due to the way that the energy plays through the glands, well, through the centers, through the glands, and the way those secretions work out. I spoke briefly about the thyroid gland relating to weight, weight gain, weight loss, and if we secrete, improperly, or there's again a blockage, or there's some sort of improper flow, then these things result. These things, we find these fluctuations again in weight if we're describing the thyroid. Again, where do we place our emphasis? Where do we choose to place our consciousness? We have a choice. We have a choice to build wants, whims, desires, and aspirations that can be, again, inclusive and more loving. And again, I would really encourage people to gauge in their own lives what are the things that tend to make them have that, if they're prone to that, feeling kind of uneasy, feeling anxious if they go to a certain place, feeling uneasy if they get behind the wheel of a car, feeling uneasy if they're going to work in the morning. I've experienced these to a greater or lesser degree, and I can relate to these different sensations. And to get to the root of why it is that we feel the way that we do about certain things. Man, know thyself, as the Greeks stated, and this is the axiom that really was one of the cornerstones of the esoteric science, in that we have to understand ourselves and understand the way that energy works through us before we can get a better grasp of how things play out in an energetic fashion, in a group sense, or in the larger context. And so I would really ask people to take some time to see what it is that either irritates or causes some anxiety, causes that nervous tension, causes one to want to light up a cigarette, or fall back on some sort of a crutch in some cases. Maybe have to pop that stomach pill to ease your stomach. Really, I would ask people to gauge that sort of thing and kind of try to pass that point. Once you can identify what it is that makes you uneasy, these trouble areas, then try to think of means in which to diffuse. There are a lot of different ways that we can diffuse situations, and we can willfully do this, but we have to be aware that there's something that we're needing to take care of. Again, these feelings crop up for a reason. When our stomach gets tied up in knots, or we get that nervous rush and our blood starts pumping, and all these symptoms that we can experience, the body functions in this way for a reason. And so these are the signs we have to pay attention to. Certainly the fight or flight of the instinctual nature, ties in, but what is it that we create? Why do we choose to create a sense of unease about certain situations, being around certain people, any number of things these are of our making. Again, as I said at the beginning of the show, wants, whims, wishes, they're all energy based. We create them, and they have a life of their own in many respects. And so, again, keeping in mind that we, as very desirous creatures, and with the quality of mind very acute and very intact, carry these problems and their consequences over into the dream world. And as more often than not, the dreams that we have are symbolic of things that we're trying to work through in our daily lives. And so much time has been spent on dream interpretation, things of that nature. But that aspect of us is, again, another way in which we can work through our wants, whims, wishes, desires, emotions. We find ourselves perhaps dreaming of that person that we want to be with, or we dream that we're at work, or circumstances at work and something bad happens, or any number of things. And so again, we tend to work this out in the dream life, and we tend to spend much time processing this. What we create. It's like having a mass filing cabinet, and there's so much clutter. The plane on which these dreams and really when a person is freshly deceased as well find themselves is the astral plane. It's a plane based on desire and emotion. If it weren't for human creation of desire, so from the inception point of basically eating of the fruit of the tree, if you want to consider it in that respect, that could kind of be considered the inception point of when the wish life started to play out and manifest itself and actually become something that is somewhat tangible. And again, that's the astral plane, and it is very real for many people, even though it is ultimately a figment of our creation. It is very real for us, paradoxically so, in a certain sense. It's, even though it's something that we made up, and it's, you know, it's something that we could almost like stick a pin in and deflate it, and it would not exist anymore. We would have to deflate, again, our misdirected wants, whims, wishes, and refocus them. If a situation were to take place in which all humanity, or a really significant number of the people on the planet, were to collectively emote love for one another and just stop, you know, kind of stop what you're doing. Forget about your work, forget about your war, forget about whatever your preoccupations are. And if the 6 billion people on the planet plus could instantaneously have that sense of well-being and goodwill towards one another, and have a genuine sense of love welling up between humanity, and all creation for that matter, then this aspect of our nature, this that we've created, could go away, and it would be one less thing that we'd have to deal with. But we've created it for a reason. We have to work through it, and this is again why we spend so much time in the dream world trying to take care of it. We're best suited in that aspect of ourselves to handle it. You know, and that's also another reason why that's a segregated aspect. We wouldn't really be able to handle the waking day life and our wish life, the Summerland experience, as it's sometimes called esoterically, that all this stuff is contained within. And so one way in which we can clear some of this and redirect this energy is by a focused prayer and intention, or what's known as invocation. This particular invocation is called the Great Invocation, and I've used it on the show previously. I would like to go ahead and use it again, also keeping in mind that today is the day of the new moon, and there is a cyclic rhythm that plays out between the new moon to the full moon, and we can kind of look at that as a building of energies and then a declining of energies. But this is, again, like the inception point, or the low point, just at the base of the hill, if we can consider it in those terms. And so we can use energy in this sense to collectively clear out some of these issues that we have to contend with. And again, the Great Invocation is one very potent prayer that's been used for some time that we can use collectively and agree upon to help focus energy in a positive manner and based on inclusive thinking and goodwill. And so if I may use this prayer briefly, I want to go ahead and share that. Anyone that's willing to join along at home, please do so. I'd much appreciate that. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of from the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. All right, thank you very much, everyone that chose to participate along at home. I do very much appreciate that. The stanza before the last line before the very last line, does speak about sealing the door where evil dwells. In many respects, the solar plexus center can be considered that door where evil dwells. Now, certainly, you know, again, I spoke about unpure thoughts and things of that nature. Again, a lot of that is relative, and a lot of what's been passed down through religious indoctrination and things of that nature isn't truly applicable. And so certainly we know certain things, we feel certain things are not proper. And so those are the things that we're encouraged to avoid. And so the door where evil dwells, certainly this could be a door in which things could be allowed in. And that could be negative thinking, again, you know, deviant thinking, ultra mega inclusive thinking where it's just utterly selfish. That can be, again, focused and centered there to our detriment. And we can seal that door. We can seal that door by virtue of using these invocations or an invocation. and a conscious, willful directing of our energy and intent. When we realize that we have problems in these areas, then we can begin to take the steps to avoid or to diffuse the situation. If we can't completely obliterate the problem, then we can at least seek to diffuse it, lessen it, and diminish the effects. And so that's part of our challenge as well. Once we identify, how do we, again, diminish or completely obliterate the problem? And they're going to be different for different people. So, and again, it's kind of like going on a diet to a certain degree as well. Once we know we've targeted the problem area, we need to avoid certain things. We know this, and so it becomes a conscious force of habit that we, do long enough to achieve the end results. In this instance, what are the end results that we want to achieve? Well, we want to, again, align energies based on, well, the triangular aspect of it is very important, and I'll get back to that as I was saying earlier. Again, light, love, and power, that's another aspect or another way in which we can describe the Trinity playing out. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, again, another way of phrasing it to describe that threefold playing out of energy. And so, again, when we have awakened the heart, the solar plexus swings up into the heart center, and then the creation, the sacral center, and the regenerative organs have swung into the area of the throat center, and then ultimately the root chakra will swing into activity in alignment with the top of the head, the crown chakra. That being tied in with the pituitary? No, the pineal. The crown chakra tied in with the pineal gland, the ajna tied in with the pituitary gland. And some may be familiar with those two major glands that are in the center of the brain that science doesn't really know a whole lot about. And Eastern science has been telling us about for tens of thousands of years. This is another thing I want to get into as well. Science is going to have to understand and accept somewhat the science of the triangles and the way in which energy works out and is stepped down in this process. As I said earlier, it's kind of like almost a mini broadcasting system where you've got the input, you've got the broadcast, you've got the amplification, and you've got ultimately the broadcasting or the emitting aspect. It's very, very similar to this, and this is the way the energetic plays out in our humanity. And so, if we have the Father aspect tied into the Son, the Son and the Holy Spirit, the Son being the heart and the Holy Spirit aspect being the third center, this is another triangle working out through our physical body, and this is something that's a transformative process. And so science, particularly psychology and psychiatry, are really going to have to, I'm not suggesting that they embrace them immediately overnight, but I am suggesting that they look into the energies underlying these processes and start to begin to think about the human condition in terms of energy, energy underlying our physical vehicle, and the energies playing out through our emotional nature and our mental nature. Now, certainly, science or medical science can see the glands, and they understand the endocrine system, and they understand the secretions and the non-secreting the ductless glands, and they understand that to somewhat of a degree, and they've made medicines that can affect these flows and things of that nature. But they're really just getting a mask. They're not really getting down to the root of the problem. And so until science and again, medical science, psychology can really get into the underlying energy that creates the emotional condition, that creates the mental condition. The scientific community would have you believe that the heart is simply a muscle and that it has no other function. They would have you believe that our consciousness and our emotions are based on just the mental synapsing, firing in the brain, and some energetic working out, and that blend of chemicals gives us our emotion and our consciousness and drives these desires and drives this drives all this aspect of us. And so I really have to take exception with that. Science doesn't readily and easily deal with things that it can't tangibly handle. It can't deal with things that it can't recreate in a lab reliably over and over again. Now, the way in which energy plays out through people is going to vary. And another thing as well that's going to have to be factored in more so is, where's the center of energy focus? Is this person centered below the diaphragm largely? Is this a person that's so tied into exclusively themselves, then that has to be factored in. Is this person more altruistic? Is this person more, someone that expresses and exudes goodwill at all times or at most times? This is going to affect where the energy manifests itself in the physical body. And so this will have to be considered and factored in more so in the future as science considers these things. All the energetics that play out through humanity are tied into this. And there's a further aspect that I'll just touch upon briefly, which is known as the science of the rays. There are allegedly 7 aspects of manifestation, and that's been symbolized in different religious texts and different philosophical texts from time immemorial, that this 7-fold aspect of our human nature expresses itself in manifestation. And so different rays are conditioned by different energies. Certain people are predisposed to certain ways of thinking and feeling by virtue of their ray composition. Persons that are, for instance, 5th ray, concrete science, might be a scientist. They might be very mental or very logical in their thinking process. A person that would be primarily 6th ray would be someone that is more devotional in their makeup, and they might be someone that's a frequent churchgoer, for instance, or they're very, very politically affiliated with one particular party. They have one particular party affiliation that they're really devoted to. And so keeping in mind that we have a personality ray makeup, and we have a mental ray makeup, an emotional ray makeup, a physical nature, an energy nature, and ultimately we have the soul ray. And all these energetics blend together. As I was saying earlier, they form varying triangles. And so these triangles intersect. And this is also where the science of astrology, those that would seek or would choose to deem it a science and not just some kind of charlatanism, but can think of those energetics in this fashion, will also start to understand things more in the sense of triunes and how things triangulate. And that word in itself gives a lot of indication or a hint to the larger playing out. How things triangulate is, that relates to determining where energy and emphasis is lied. When we triangulate something and we determine a coordinate, we determine a fixed point, then we can manifest something along the lines of that fixed point. So how do we, consider these things in the sense of triangles? That's yet to really manifest itself. That's still something that time is yet to work out, but I think it will become something that's going to be more point of consideration in the future. And I want to also remind people about the potency of mind and how we collectively as humanity can make a difference. When you see thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people gathering for, let's say, a protest, or we spoke last week about the situation in Myanmar where the Buddhist monks were having a protest, and they were having a lot of people that were joining. This kind of playing out is something also, that plays out through our humanity. And we can choose to be more, again, inclusive in our thinking and be more aware of current events and start to think of things in the larger picture and not just in an isolationist sense. That doesn't negate, a sense of, somewhat national understanding, and that, there's a reason to existing for all countries. And so, we can be respectful of that and still consider things as one humanity. That's another tricky thing too, that, how do we in the future determine how to lay that energy and emphasis? We're going to have to get past, once we get past the selfish thinking and that people are thinking in a global context, then where does this collective group thinking decide to lay its energy and emphasis? Who's going to be the arbiter? Who's going to be the determining group that decides these things? Do we rely on, again, individual representatives? That's yet to manifest itself too. And I think certainly the UN leaves much to be desired as the organization that would be, deciding things for the globe collectively. But we still have to work towards this understanding of a more inclusive nature, and also keeping more, more aware in our daily lives with how our bodies react into certain situations. And this is, again, the main point that I want people to kind of take away as a bit of a homework exercise, if you will, that keeping in mind what are the things that upset us, what are the things that make us anxious, and conversely, what are the things that give us joy and happiness. And so where do we sense that? And if we have a sense of impending doom, or we have a sense of uneasiness, or frustration, futility, what is it? Why is it? Did circumstances accumulate through the day and build up, and all of a sudden, the volcano exploded and that was just the last straw? Or do we start to identify certain things that we can put a finger on, that we can say, okay, this causes this, or this contributes to this, a more appropriate term, and start to think in terms of what the causes are. The cause lying beneath the manifestation. This again is one of the ABCs of the esoteric thinking, is that there's energy playing out that leads to manifestation. So once we understand, why things manifest, we usually have to tweak the energetic. We usually have to either quit giving energy to a certain condition or mode of thinking, or again learn to diffuse it in some fashion. So this again is a definite trick that we have to start to consider more so. I see, in my estimation, I see that the future of humanity will play out in that mankind will start to grow more altruistic, and then the energies will begin to play out in the sense that we will be able to intuit collectively. And this also ties into another aspect of, and I'm a bit all over the map here, so I apologize for that, but one of the things that this will lead to ultimately, once we swing that pendulum of energy collectively as a race, as one humanity, to a point of focus, again, in an open heart arena where the Ajna Center is transmitting in the way in which it should, the way in which it's constructed to do, but doesn't do because it's not activated. We have to activate it. And it's like a bank card. You have to activate it before it'll work, I guess. At any rate, so once it's activated, it can be used and processed. That being the case, we can start to tune in more so with our fellow humanity. We can also be more understanding of the needs of the animal kingdom and even the lesser kingdoms in nature. We can have somewhat of a sense of the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, their needs and their relationship to us, and that necessity will become more apparent as again this energetic is altered within humanity, enough numbers of humanity to make a difference. That enough humanity will definitely alter a significant amount of energy in what plays out and what manifests on this planet. And so we can ultimately become more psychically in tune with our fellow humanity. Now this may seem a bit far-fetched, but when things are aligned properly, then this automatically kicks in. There are exercises that people can use to prematurely try to activate a psychic sense, but when things unfold in a right and proper fashion naturally, then again it takes place on its own. We don't really have to work towards it so much. Certainly we can consider meditation, and meditation is the main way that's been used for a long time to safely allow alignment to take place. Now certainly selfless service to humanity, as I always like to remind folks as well, is the main way in which that naturally takes place. If we want to force the issue somewhat, then we can meditate and we can force the flow into a certain alignment, and we can accentuate certain centers, and we can cause these conditions to blossom forth little by little, or again more quickly in certain circumstances. What plays out is initiated by us. We initiate these energies that play out, and so we create the circumstances, we create the situations. If we create the problems, then we can create the solutions. That's pretty much the nuts and bolts, basic bottom line to it all. So considering that in that sense, again, man, know thyself. What is it that causes us to tick? And also keep in mind, the idea of a dream journal is not really a bad idea as well. Those that have proficiency in remembering dreams, and obviously, remembering them right when you wake up is the easiest way to do this, because you're still essentially the part of you that was in that dream life state has one foot still in it, so to speak, and so you still have some access to what was played out there. We can get a better grasp of all these things and we tie it in together and factor it in together. And hopefully, as I was saying earlier, hopefully science and psychiatry will begin to tie in the dream analysis with, some means of discerning where the energy is playing out in the personality in our waking day life. How does that marry and how does that play out? And then how do we meet the needs of people that have some inadequacy, some flow issue, or some inflammation as a result of this condition? So again, keeping in mind the dividing line, the solar plexus is basically a dividing point between the higher man and the lower man, and this is what this is the point. This is the reflecting point. This is like a pool that reflects images of whatever are cast into it, or a mirror that reflects whatever image is cast into it. And so that's another thing as well. People generally tend to, the way in which, again, some people can be very, very focused in their wants, whims, and aspirations, and there can be it can be like a laser light. It can be focused and honed into pinpoint accuracy and precision and very high intensity. The average person, though, is very vague and nebulous, and they want this minute, and they want this the next minute. So no real, what's known as a thought form or a substantial congealing or consolidation of the wish manifest. So if nothing manifests, then it's just kind of just vague, nebulous kind of fog. And this is the condition of the astral plane. This is the condition of the plane where these wishes and whims reside. So in most cases, they are not clear. They are fuzzy, if you will, and there's not much detail and definition. And this again is based on how intently, how focused we're able to be in drawing these wants and whims and wishes to us. Certain, teaching has been re-released in a more popular fashion recently, and ideas about the law of attraction are certainly more prominent in the minds of the public. So this definitely ties in as well. How, once we determine what it is we want, how do we draw it in? Or conversely, if we're drawing in negative ideas, negative energy, how do we diffuse it? How do we shut it off? And another aspect with the solar plexus center that is maybe a little bit more on the hypothetical land, but much of what a lot of what is known, or a lot of what manifests itself in what is known as demon possession, and a lot of obsession and possession in particular, when people feel as if they are taken over by an entity. This happens to people more and more frequently, and this generally takes place through the solar plexus center. People oftentimes, pretty reliably, reportedly, feel some pressure on their chest, feel pressure right in this area. And it's been portrayed in movies as well, too, where, the person's stomach is going in. There's some unseen force trying to get into that person, trying to take them over. And that is generally the point where that takes place, is through the solar plexus. Because, again, it's this clearinghouse. It's that seat of energy where the wants, whims, desires, and all these things are seated. And so it's the point of least resistance by virtue of that it goes right there into the gut and tries to make itself perhaps, more permanent resident, or at least be able to influence. That's another thing too. It's the point of easiest influence by these, critters, if you will, these entities that mostly are not always malicious. Sometimes they're just opportunistic. That's more accurate. They're just taking advantage of an open door. But we can seal the door where evil dwells. We can seal the solar plexus from invasions from not only our own intrusive thoughts that are unpleasant and undesirable, we can shield ourselves from these outside influences, and they do exist. I'm not saying that they're, as prevalent as some claim, but there certainly is. That certainly does play out. That certainly is an aspect of our manifestation. That certainly is something that we can succumb to if we're not careful, or we can use protection. Certainly, those that are more Christian in their slant or their leanings can invoke the name of Christ, and this allegedly works to break that grip, or to prevent invasions, prevent intrusions. We can cut that negative, we can sever that negative tie by an invocation like that. And so it's up to us as to how we choose to center our energies. Sometimes we're unconscious about it, and a lot of times the day gets the best of us, and we feel upset about things, and we have to reel that back in. It's really up to us as to how much we want to let the day overwhelm us, and let circumstances and let our wants and our wishes completely control us. We can be obsessed to the point of, again, really negative health. It's up to us as to where we want to lay our focus and what we want to accentuate. And my advice, my hope, my optimistic hope is that more individuals will begin to think again in altruistic fashion, or in altruistic terms, in an inclusive fashion, and in terms of goodwill. It's certainly my hope. I want to definitely thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the starship Esoterica. I'd like to thank Donna for helping to navigate. I really feel like we're on the verge of working some of the bugs out here down at Access. I want to remind folks about Jeff Contreras, Channel 10, 10 p.m., Freeman, 10 p.m., Channel 16. We here are on Channel 16 every Thursday, 8 p.m. I do want to thank you folks out there in the viewing audience for tuning in. Thanks, Austin. Oh, so don't forget the Metaphysical Philosophical meeting, the 17th, 8 p.m., Spider House, 29th and Guadalupe. Thanks, Austin. Have a nice evening. We'll see you.